Okay, so everyone seems to be talking about AI, whether it's in a sort of domestic situation or in the workplace as well. And the impression is given, rightly or wrongly, that sort of everyone's doing it, and if you're not, you're kind of somehow missing out on that. I mean, is that true? Has the vast majority of people got to grips with that already, or is it still fairly early days for folks?
So I think it is fairly early days. Just a couple of years ago, it was a very, it was an issue that only a handful of people were interested in and were excited about. And then it's really changed in the last couple of years. So it's still early, but if you haven't made the move yet, how long are you going to keep waiting? At what point, what indicators are there that it's time to move? And I would say now is that moment, or you're going to start falling behind.
And in terms of one of the other sort of assumptions, again, rightly or wrongly, is that like a lot of sort of new technologies, particularly in the the IT space, that it's the big companies that are doing it and also can use it because they've got the resources to get to grips with it, understand it, and then deploy it. And therefore the SMEs are, will struggle to. But AI seems to be one of these technologies, if you can get to grips, where it's a bit of a sort of leveler that small companies can appear to be big. I suppose in the same way that e-commerce companies behind the website, you don't know whether there's two people or 2,000. Is that right? I mean, is AI a potential game changer for SMEs in terms of being able to take on larger companies, for example?
I think what has made particularly this latest generation of AI very accessible to SMEs is the fact that the user interface looks exactly like a search engine. It just feels familiar, it looks familiar, we're comfortable using it, and you don't need any specialist skills. I would still encourage SMEs to investigate that assumption because there are some limitations of these technologies, which is good news for us. You know, we don't want them taking over our jobs. But that also means that we need to invest some time in understanding what those limitations are. What is it that we bring? What is it that those machines bring? But in terms of how we can scale up and how we can get bigger, we're in a completely different world today to the one we were in 3 or 4 years ago. We now have three-person tech companies heading straight for unicorn status. And the idea that a measure of success as the number of employees is gone out the window now, because we do have these technologies for some roles that we can deploy. Obviously, if you're a building company, if you're working construction, you still need your laborers and you need your work. But there are opportunities today that there weren't 4 years ago. And I think it's a great time to be a small to medium enterprise that is able to turn quickly in response to all of these changes.
Yeah, and the mention of the workforce and AI, I guess the next question, which again a lot of people are sort of exercised by, is the thought that AI is going to, the reports in the papers is going to wipe out millions of jobs. We're all going to be sat at home twiddling our thumbs while a few people, lucky people, and kind of AI robots, whatever, do everything for us. And at the other end of the scale, there are the optimists, shall we say, that suggest that AI is actually going to increase the job count because there are going to be lots of new jobs. And then I suppose there's some there in the middle. Do you have any thoughts as to how you think? And I guess companies obviously therefore maybe scared to deploy it because they think they're going to have to lay off people or their own jobs at risk. So just your thoughts, I suppose, as to what where the truth lies, if it's possible to uncover it.
So the answer is all three are going to happen in different ways. We are going to see some jobs vanishing, especially jobs where there are very routine decisions to be taken. There's not really much justification for still keeping humans making those decisions for us. In most roles, that's a small part of what we do. So we'll be automating that little bit of our job on Monday morning, perhaps, and then we'll carry on doing the rest of our job the rest of the day. And for most of us, that's what we're going to experience. We're definitely seeing new roles appearing. AI audit is the most obvious one that has appeared recently. And if you're an accountancy firm, for example, you have an amazing set of skills there that you could shift to offer AI auditing. Who else in the workforce has the kind of skills for auditing roles that your workers have? We've seen opportunities for data collection and data standardization, a lot like we do with financial data on our carbon. And that's a new role we've seen appearing, and we're going to see a lot more coming. For the vast majority of us, it's going to be about the quality of the decisions that we make. At the end of the day, your professional success depends on the quality of the decisions you make. The success of your business depends on the quality of decisions you make. And we're going to see opportunities to make much better decisions, integrating human thought and machine insight.
Yeah, and I mean, talk of that in terms of better decision making, I guess slightly predating AI, but now big is the thought that data, all the data that your company collects is going to be vitally important to help that decision making. I mean, is that the right approach to take, or should people still be aware that, certain data is always going to be rubbish? You're never going to get some amazing insights out of it. I just thought, is it the safest approach just to keep everything just in case, or does that end up leading to a sort of warehouse, a virtual warehouse full of data that's never going to be used? Just where does what should SMEs be doing, I guess, with all their customer data, holding on to it, or being more discerning as to what they keep and what they don't?
I think customer data is incredibly helpful, and you would want to keep that because it shows you patterns and it shows you trends. You will have legal retention periods that you have to delete it afterwards. You will possibly want to delete it because it is no longer valid, it's outdated, and it's not useful to you. Depending on what your job is, sometimes outdated means 2 weeks old. Sometimes it means 20 years. So you have to make the decision discerningly as to whether to keep it. And of course, storing data has a financial cost. It has an environmental cost. It doesn't just exist in the sky. It's in a server somewhere, chugging away, churning away, using electricity. Some of the data which perhaps companies did not think was useful, like emails between customers and your staff, actually now we can extract incredible insight from them where you couldn't in the past. And they might be more useful than you might have thought, for example. And there may be other cases like photographs, images, those kinds of things that you haven't really thought about as valuable. But again, you've got to make sure you've got the legal right to use it. You've got to make sure you made it clear to your customers that you're going to be using it to train this information. And if not, it's got to be deleted. So it's a nuanced question. There's no one size fits all. You really have to take a long, deep look at your data and how you might use it and how you might share it with your employees so they can maybe see a solution that you can't.
And in terms of that overall sort of landscape, people's attitudes, that the folks you're chatting to, I imagine there are a range of responses from sort of outright panic for some of the reasons we've discussed to excitement at all the opportunities. I mean, is there a typical response that when you talk to people, or I say some people are really pro and others, completely scared, or just to give people that indication they're not alone if they're, scared or excited? Just where do you think most people's sort of radar is at the moment?
Among the general public, horror is quite often the response. And I think that's fair enough. It's come as a surprise. I think if you've been working in the technical field as I have, you've seen this coming over the last few years. We had a little panic because we didn't realize what generative AI could do. And it seemed to be evolving far too fast even for us to be able to explain where the limits were. And I think even now we know where the limits are. Generative AI can make a beautiful picture, or it can write a lovely letter, but it has no awareness of its context, what's happening around it, those kinds of things, questions that are really quite important to us. Where I would like people to get is away from the horror. Not necessarily we must adopt everything immediately, but somewhere in the middle where you are being more discerning and you're choosing what technologies you apply. Start small, start with very basic analytics and just get to understand what the challenges are working with them. And then you'll be really good at working with some of the more sophisticated tools and techniques out there.
And in terms of the longer term picture, at the moment everyone's very excited by Gen AI. I'm sure they've all tried them, whether it's to write their annual reports or a customer presentation, all that kind of stuff. But is it fair to say that eventually that everyone will be doing that, so it's almost like no major commercial advantage, but it's when more sophisticated AI apps get developed and more bespoke ones for whether it's your industry or your individual company needs, is that where the real value is going to lie?
So since the beginning of computing, we've seen AI go through these peaks and troughs. We call them summers and winters. Summers when everybody's excited and investing, and then winters when the investment just dies down. It's my opinion we're about to see a winter because we've got $1 trillion invested in AI, and it's so far returned $1 billion in profit, which is totally unsustainable financially. And so we are going to see companies pulling out of these AI technologies for the moment, because the way we anticipated them being used is not how they're being used. People are using them to make, pretty pictures for their social media feed. Other kinds of creative tasks, but not the productivity time-saving tasks that the companies promised. Now, then what also is happening at the moment is that we have a large number of startups in Silicon Valley who are looking to train these general purpose machines to do something more specific, more useful, with a more specialized data set. And in a couple of years' time, we may start to see a different generation of tools coming out that use the same technology we have today, but can do something a little bit more useful than summarizing your meeting notes. Although, having said that, summarizing meeting notes is, an amazing time saver. Helping you find information is an amazing time saver. We shouldn't mock these simple applications. Adoption has been disappointing. I don't think anybody would argue against that. In terms of this more sophisticated technology that's coming, there's nothing on the horizon yet. So as I said, with the transformer architecture, bear with me, that powers the generative AI technology, that's the way we code it up to make these beautiful pictures or make these incredibly impressive texts. There's nothing in there that can support understanding context, and that's incredibly limiting for this technology. You're always going to need a human in charge, always going to need a human operating it to be able to support that decision process. Because, if you're driving a car, what's happening around me is terrifically important. And these technologies can't answer that. There may be other technologies coming in the future that interact with each other. So if, for example, I wanted to create an AI that could detect cancer, bowel cancer, and another one that could detect throat cancer, I need a different AI each time. There's not one universal machine that I can just scan someone's body and it will tell me what the diagnosis is. You need your doctor, you need your radiographer to say, I think it's bowel cancer, let's try this one. If that doesn't work, let's try this one. And so we call this interactive AI. And again, there's no sign of that coming anytime soon. So what is the next step? I think we've reached the limits of where we can go with the current generation of technology. Brilliant, doing amazing jobs, but limited jobs. And so that's why I'm positively optimistic that it's going to help us. We should be using it. There are some great things we can do today that we couldn't do before. Don't panic. We're fine, I think, for a while longer, unless there's some secret laboratory in Silicon Valley that I don't know about.
But I guess for companies that think they've come up with an idea or a way that AI might help them beyond this sort of early stage, should we call it, is it relatively easy for them to identify people that might be able to help them? Or as you explained, are they all sort of stuck in Silicon Valley and it'll cost you, sort of a few $1 million to engage with them, therefore, you can't do anything right now? Or are there places where you can go to at least people understand what it is you want to do and maybe try and help you build an application?
It is challenging to find the right people to advise you at the moment. I've been to plenty of conferences where people have stood up and given talks on AI, and it's been clear for me in the audience that they have no idea what they're talking about technically. And so they give kind of bad advice. Things like you can control the hallucination of generative AI tools. This is where they just make things up. You can't control that. There's nothing in the technology that allows you to control that. And so I think there's a lot of bad advice out there at the moment. If people are interested, at the Institute of Analytics, we have some introductory courses, not for people who love technology and coding, but just have to make decisions with these tools. And they have to understand how the machine is reaching those decisions. And so we have we call it C-suite training. Guys who are never going to go back and learn how to carry out the analytics, but nonetheless need to make a sensible decision based on that. And and I think that's the direction to go in. Find somebody who really does have the credentials, knows what they're talking about. There's a lot of bad advice out there I've seen, because it's It's an area people are picking up on as popular and in demand, and the supply is just not professionalized at the moment.
And in the I suppose the longer term, and clearly it's not that easy to predict, but the type of AI apps that are going to make the biggest difference, is it the Gen AI ones that are relatively simple and, as you say, just make repetitive tasks sort of go away for humans and can be done more efficiently by machines, if you like? Or do you think when this second generation, or even I suppose the subsequent third generation becomes more sophisticated, that's when the real game changing, the more significant game changing will happen? Any thoughts as to how that AI apps, which will be the clever ones in the future, the groups of them?
I think there are two things that will separate the clever ones from the not so helpful ones. One thing is that there are right now a lot of startups working hard with these generic generative AIs to train them to do a very specific task. And I think once we start seeing those coming on the market, we're going to see huge benefits. I mean, already when you're using something like ChatGPT, for example, if you ask it to act as a chief financial officer, and you give it parameters and the problem that you're dealing with, it can already give you a pretty good suggestion on what you can do, what options are available to you. It's not a definite solution. You shouldn't follow it by the book, but it can steer you in the right direction to ask the right questions going forwards. And those are just going to get better and better. And I'm quite optimistic about these highly trained chat GPTs that specialize. And they're coming right now. And then I guess the other helpfulness of these technologies, and we see this in medicine, if you have a plan for dealing with error, because this is the big problem, that they make mistakes all the time. And in medicine, they have an incredibly structured testing process. Whether the drug was developed by humans or by a machine, they've got this rigorous clinical trial process that they have to put things through, and testing to make sure that they check it before they release it to the public. And I think where organizations are able to use the current technology, but with the right kind of testing and rigorous checking afterwards, there are terrific benefits. And we're seeing it in medicine. We're seeing massive breakthroughs in drug development, which quite honestly has stalled over the last few years, but is suddenly opening up all sorts of new opportunities.
Okay, and at the event itself, AI Transform, you're talking about data democracy, and I guess it would be good for those that don't know what that is if you can give us a brief explanation, and then perhaps just talk about how why it is so important, I guess, in terms of helping SMEs and others to understand and engage with it so that it can bring benefit to their organizations.
Yes, so when we started this interview, you asked me about the monopoly that these big tech companies have got over data solutions, and they have all the data and we don't. Even data on ourselves we don't have. If you run a company and you sell on Amazon, Amazon knows everything about you, and you have to pay for the right to find out what you and your data contains. We've got new laws coming that will make that easier to challenge. We've got open data sets out there that you can use to develop your own solutions. So you don't have to keep paying for somebody else's data. Something like weather data or traffic data, pretty simple, supplied by the government, is worth 2 billion a year to the US economy. And, small companies that are using it and creating solutions based on this data. And if we have the right skills, we can easily tap into that and access it and integrate it with our solutions. So democratizing data, it's about not being scared of the process. It's about knowing that there is support out there is help out there, and there is data you can use to help you make really good decisions going forwards, better decisions, better profits, all good.
Okay, and in terms of just sort of some final thoughts, people are wanting to find out more about the AI and what it can do for them. Just your thoughts as to any bits of advice as to how they go about, I guess, building a plan, and even the early steps of implementing. Because as you say, there's a sort of now, I guess, generative AI is here and now to a certain extent, but then there's this future out there as well. Just any advice you can give to folks as to how to start the journey or refine the journey if they've already started.
So there are 6 clear steps, and we have this actually on our website that you can follow, to becoming a more data native organization where data drives decision making rather than it's an afterthought. And it's kind of clear how you have to go through those steps. At the beginning, you probably know nothing about data. You maybe collect financial data because it's legally mandated, but perhaps the next step is to start using that financial data, not to understand the past, but to start predicting in the future. And then perhaps the step after that is to start integrating non-financial data with your financial data to see if you can improve the quality of those predictions. And all of this is with pretty simple analytics. We don't have to be geniuses to be able to run some of these analytics. And we can do this in Excel, for example, which is a pretty basic, it's a very basic tool, but we can still do it there because that's where many people are comfortable. And then after that, it's about evolving into a data native company that has data at the heart, at its strategy, so that when you're thinking about the goals that you'd like to achieve, you're starting to think about what data is out there that could support you, what analytical techniques are out there that could support you, what you can buy in from a third party to help you. And there are some amazing tools out there at the moment.
And in terms of just one supplementary, sorry, I promise it's the final question because you give me some good time. In terms of whether it's attending the event or just more generally, is it fair to say that yes, AI, everyone thinks always a technology that'll be for technical people, but whether it's your data democracy piece or just more generally, there are opportunities for, if you like, non-skilled people to understand what AI can do for them and almost drive it sort of bottom up and say, look, AI can help us in the marketing department, or as you say, in the accounts department, whatever. So it's a good idea, not just to say, oh, well, that's for the technologists, but actually to have a basic level, at least, of AI, whatever your role might be in a company.
Absolutely. So I was not technically trained when I was young. When I was 18, I was not sitting in a computer science department at 18 years old. I came to technology much, much later in life. I was incredibly fortunate to be trained and mentored by Professor Dame Wendy Hall, she heads up the AI review that was commissioned by the government. She was the inventor of the Internet of Things. She's as important as they come in AI today. She's one of the creators. She has an incredibly clear and important message. AI is about the kind of society that we want. It's not about, can we get a bit higher numbers in our sales figures? Can we find a new way to reach our customers? It's fundamentally about the kind of workplace we want, the society we want, because these machines are making decisions for us on our behalf about the way things should be in the future. 100% we should all be engaged in that. In terms of where we're going in your future career, life is long. You have a long career ahead of you. Even if you're in your 40s, you've got another 20, 25 years to work still. This is where we're going. You've got to start upskilling. You don't have to do the coding if you don't like it. You don't have to do the analytics if you don't like it, but you do have to understand how those machines are working. And this is the fear that we have. When we understand how these technologies work, we know it's always a compromise. We know that we have always had to accept faults as a payoff for the benefits that we get. And if you don't understand what those faults are, if you don't understand those risks, you're going to struggle to participate in the working economy over the next 20, 30, for some of you listening, it could be 40 years. It's not an option, I'm afraid. As much as I would love it to be, this is no longer optional. It's something we all have to do.
No, that's fair enough. I'm in my 50s, but I think I still need to catch up with the AI, as you say. It's here and now, isn't it, for everyone? So it's been great to chat to you and some brilliant insights from you. Obviously looking forward to hearing you at the event itself. But at least for now, Claire, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip.